Reclaiming innocence. Recently, myself and my wife have been watching a show on Netflix called Innocence. It's a Norwegian drama about these two teenagers and the sweetness of their connection and how innocent they are still in terms of the world. Um, it's the same time at the moment that the current Pope has just visited Ireland, Pope Francis, and so much has been in the media about the loss of innocence, particularly the child abuse, the cover-ups, the, 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 the babies that were just buried in the mother homes. Um, there's so much loss of innocence. And it made me wake up this morning and think, how can I reclaim my own innocence? What does it mean? I have three small, wonderful boys, three children, who are so innocent. They have that quality about them at the moment. And it made me consider, as an adult, have I lost my own sense of innocence, and where has it gone, and what does it mean? So today's video is about exploring that and inviting perhaps you, if you're watching this, to help me explore it. So innocence is, as we grow older, I suppose our innocence changes. We become exposed to the world, and oftentimes, I know myself, when I was in my early 20s, I became very cynical, very shut down, and my sense of innocence was gone. My openness was gone, and there was a lot of suffering in that. Cynicism, cynical, oh, I know everything, I've done it all now. But there's a numbness there. And I think, I remember reading the poet David White, who writes on spirituality, would say, hopefully when we reach the end of our physical lives, that we still have enough innocence to get us through. And I was always struck by what a wonderful, thought-provoking line that was. That when we reach the end of our physical lives, we still have enough innocence to get us through. And of course, innocence is not the same, that childlike innocence goes. It's not the same as naivety. We've become wise to the world. But I feel in today's society, we can often be overwhelmed by so much information, in the media especially, about what's going on in the world, and it's rarely positive. So there's a constant feeding of a negative story about what's going on in the world, and that's not to take away from the fact that there are terrible tragedies occurring and people acting in all sorts of unhealthy and harmful ways. But, how can I re-establish my innocence is the question I'm holding today as an adult. What does that look like? So, for me, connecting more deeply into that question in my meditation practice and listening for guidance from deeper wisdom, my sense is that innocence is an openness. It's an openness to life. It's an openness to this moment. It's a curiosity. It allows me to be alive, to be playful, to be open to wonder, without which life can become very closed and shut down, and we feel overwhelmed or numbed out in some way or other. So as I look at my children and their openness and their sense of curiosity and wonder at all of life, I have to ask myself, how can I reconnect to that, to those qualities in myself? So to somehow let go of the world weariness that can surround me, and to awaken to each day again with a quality of innocence. So I find that my meditation practice really helps me to do that in the morning. If I allow myself to sit and, you know, at a deeper level, when I awaken each day, when we awaken each day, we are recreating our sense of identity, our sense of self. So every day when I wake up, it takes a few moments, and then my story comes alive in my mind again. What have I got to do today? What do the kids need? What do I need to do for work? The whole story comes alive in me as I meet the day. And one way of describing that is that I'm recreating my sense of self, who I am, my identity each morning. And then, like dressing for work, then going into that identity and living through it. And that identity will have certain values or not, or certain qualities. But these qualities don't necessarily come from the story itself that's going on in the mind. They come from a deeper place. So one way to describe it, I suppose, is, I really like the idea that I remember one of my Buddhist teachers describing it as going to the cinema. And, each morning when I wake up, the projector starts up and the film of the story of my life starts to play. And then the light shines through the film and creates the story on the screen, and then I live in the story. I live in the film. I live in the film. And really, I can change the story that's playing through the projector as often as I want. I can change it in all sorts of ways. But really, it's the quality of light that shines through the story that makes all the difference. And that quality of light is very much dependent upon my practice, my meditation practice in the morning. If I sit and center myself and reconnect to my innocence in sense of opening, allowing space for having the curiosity to be with whatever is arising, then that quality of light, as it shines through my story, creates a film that's much more enhanced and much more positive than otherwise. So, on a feeling level then, as I go through my day in my mindfulness practice, I'm seeking to maintain that quality of innocence within me. It's almost like a vulnerability. It feels vulnerable. There's a softness there. It brings me into my heart. There's a gentleness there, which is a great antidote to the stress that the story of what's going on in my day can create. So there's always stresses that come in, negative situations, difficulties, looking for my attention to take me out of connectedness, to take me away from my innocence, my openness, the sweetness of, perhaps we could even describe it as my authentic self. That when we really reach into and connect with the authentic self, That's where innocence lives. That's where innocence lives. As I reach in and in that sense of deep listening and allowing and connect to the authentic self, the innocence can arise then more freely within me. And I don't become, as is often described, childish, but childlike in how I am in my day. And if anything, that's the gift that my 3 children have given me, besides exhaustion and constant sleep deprivation. But the gift they've really given me is to mirror that back, to mirror it back, to be able to connect into my authentic self and allow the natural innocence which is within us all. It's not something we give or receive necessarily. It is a quality of openness. It's a quality of vulnerability, of availability to each moment and to ourselves in the moment. And unfortunately, as we explore perhaps the shadow of that, I was reminded in my listening into my wisdom space in my practice this morning that, we have the laws of physics, which worldwide we accept this is how things work physically. And I was reminded that we also have the laws of relating. There's a set of universal laws, don't ask me to describe them necessarily, but of how we relate psychologically and in relationship and energetically, what happens between people. And these haven't been necessarily universally taught or ascribed to yet. But, one of these psychological or relational laws is that if we can't connect to or find something in ourselves, then we go outside ourselves to look for that. We go outside ourselves, And the shadow of, in general, that's fine in the short term. We look for innocence in others if we can't find it in ourselves. We try and relate to people who have perhaps show more of innocence than we have, or openness. We're attracted to that. And then ultimately, unfortunately, I've been reminded so much in the media around the time of this Pope's visit in the Catholic Church, and not just in the Catholic Church, but in society as well, in a wider sense. There's, the terrible tragedy that, if somebody has lost the innocence within themselves, they try and take it from someone else, and take it from children. And of course, in doing that, they cause all sorts of harm to the children and to themselves. So now, the abuses that have gone on, the abuser says, to the child, now you're just like me. I lost innocence, so I'm taking yours because it's so attractive. And then the child loses their innocence, and the cycle perpetuates itself. So the terrible tragedy and suffering of that. And we all, maybe not in such extreme ways, but we've all lost innocence along the way. We disconnect from what's real. We disconnect from what's healthy. We disconnect from what's loving towards ourselves and others. We disconnect, And I remember recently, somebody saying, I was working with someone, and they said, I don't understand this person that I'm with. We've been married for a long time, and he doesn't want to do anything with me anymore. I don't understand. I don't understand. And I said, look, perhaps it's not that you don't understand. You know, this person has an alcohol problem for the last X amount of years. So perhaps it's more about that you're not willing to accept that this is the cost of that. This person has an alcohol addiction, and the cost of that is that they don't want to do anything with you anymore because they've withdrawn into themselves, into their pain. So it's very easy, I think, to label, I don't understand. We live in a society that says that, particularly when things are rough. And things are quite rough at this time in our society. Things are quite insane on many levels. Recently, a woman came to me and said, I've just, been made aware of 2 suicides in my town, a woman in her 30s and a young father with 3 children. How could he do that? How could he take his own life and leave his wife and children like that behind? I don't understand. I don't understand. And I said, well, again, that's the standard line we have in our society. That's the standard line. I don't understand, and therefore I don't necessarily need to put myself in someone else's shoes. There's always a reason for these things. Always. Always. These terrible tragedies which are constantly happening all the time. It's like we've turned away in the loss of our innocence. We've moved into madness. We've moved into terrible madness and destructive behaviors. And the evidence is everywhere around us at different levels. So, again, I was made aware of this kind of stock response in our society. I don't understand. When I was reading about an article on vaccinating children. So this is a conversation I've been having with my wife back and forth for many years. And somebody wrote, these anti-vaxxers, I don't understand how stupid they are. I don't understand how stupid they are. I don't understand how stupid they are. And I thought to myself, my God, that's never going to change anything, is it? I don't understand doesn't change the situation. Wouldn't it be wonderful if somebody could write, I do understand. I've taken the time to explore what the other person is feeling and thinking and why they're in the position they're in. I may not agree with it, but at least I understand where they're coming from. So it's easy to label, isn't it? Even in the most horrendous situation, oh, that's a pedophile, that's a child abuser. I don't understand. They're just bad apples. Is often said in the church at the moment by the priests in the church who have abused children. And again, that doesn't solve anything. We have to go deeper to explore the reasons behind their behavior. Why did they lose innocence? Why? How were they formed? Why are there so many of them that have abused in this way? Why was it all covered up? What is the what is what are the influences on these people that have turned them into perpetrators that have been so terrible, you know? And I don't understand isn't gonna cut it, ultimately. So as we return to innocence, as we reconnect to the authentic self within, that's where the real wisdom lies too. As I said this morning in my meditation practice, I was listening into my wisdom space, where I can feel the presence of greater awareness as it encompasses me in that space. That's the best way to describe it. Or if you're a techie, I plug myself into the universal internet and I allow myself to listen for that deeper wisdom. And that deeper wisdom always creates connectedness. It always creates connectedness and ultimately a deeper connection into a surrendering, if you like, into softness, into just letting go of the stress that the story that's ongoing is demanding of me, and reconnecting back into the light of consciousness, the essence of who we are, the essence of who we are. So this is a bit of a long video it's turned out, and going beyond the bounds of what they describe as engaging for people, 3 or 4 minutes at the most. So if you managed to stay with me for this long, I thank you so much for sharing. And if you'd like to respond or perhaps help me to overcome any ignorance I might have, please do and share with me. But otherwise, I'd like to leave you with the opportunity of practicing more innocence in your daily life, connecting to that deeper wisdom and openness and allowing and surrender to the present moment.